President Joseph R. Biden, RFK
Jr.
in America. What do you guys do?
I promised I'd be a president for all Americans.
I'm going to harness love for political purposes. I will meet you on that field, and sir, love will win.
I was suing a bunch of coal-burning power plants and cement kilns in 2004 for discharging mercury, poisoning all the fish in America. And people started coming up to me at that time, mainly women with children who had intellectual disabilities, who were vaccine injured. And they'd come up to me and say, if you're really concerned about mercury exposures to children, you need to look at vaccines. And I didn't want to do it.
Get it off your chest.
You see these huge levels of depression and despair, loneliness in kids. And I don't think that there's a single cause to it. And I think blaming it on, depression about climate is probably oversimplistic. In fact, I think a lot of the problems we see in kids, and particularly boys, it's probably underappreciated that how much of that is coming from chemical exposures, including a lot of the sexual dysphoria that we're seeing. They're swimming through a soup of toxic chemicals today, and many of those are endocrine disruptors. There's atrazine throughout our water supply. Atrazine, by the way, if you in a lab put atrazine in a tank full of frogs, it will chemically castrate and forcibly feminize every frog in there, and 10% of the frogs, the male frogs, will turn into fully viable females able to produce viable eggs. If it's doing that to frogs, it could. There's a lot of other evidence that it's doing it to human beings as well.
This all sounds like very reasonable, nuanced opinions.
And by the way, it's not just me saying it.
There are a lot of issues we can disagree on, but there are issues we can work together on.
Mr. President, talk to me.
You can protect yourself, and you should protect yourself, quite frankly. Get vaccinated. Get boosted. There's plenty of booster shots.
Profiting from a public health crisis, you should be investigating Pfizer. You should be investigating Moderna.
Does that make you upset?
What's happening here? And Bobby is absolutely right about that when it comes to the way these industries have power. Look what's happening with our defense budget. Raytheon and Northrop Grumman and Boeing get to regulate themselves. We know how they're price gouging, whether it has to do with big food, big chemical, big ag. You have guys who represent big ag who are heading the Department of Agriculture. You have a former board member at Raytheon who's heading the Defense Department. So whenever you have these agencies that theoretically are there to advocate for us, but have now become double advocates, which is impossible. That's the problem. And so, yes, pharmaceutical companies are giving too much free rein, and I want to see independent research, and that's
the big pharma is still going to do very well, I promise you all. I promise you, they're going to do very well.
Now you feel guilty, right?
Lay in bed at night like my dad did, staring at the ceiling, wondering what in God's names happens if your spouse gets cancer, or your child gets deadly ill, or something happens to you. What are you going to get money to pay for those medical bills? Or are you going to have to sell the house or try to get a second mortgage on it? I get it. I get it. With the Inflation Reduction Act that I signed into law, we're taking on powerful interests to bring healthcare costs down so you can sleep better at night with more security. We pay more for prescription drugs than any nation in the world. Let me say it again. Big Pharma is still going to do very well, I promise you all. I promise you, they're going to do very well.
Do you think there is any other way to go out there and energize the base without exhausting or terrorizing them?
Such as universal health care, such as tuition-free college, higher education and tech school, such as free child care, such as paid family leave and sick pay, such as a guaranteed living wage, and such as a 21st century economic bill of rights. Those are moderate positions in every other country. Every other country has them. They are mainstream. Ladies and gentlemen, hear me when I tell you this. The American people have been trained to expect so little. The American people have been played.
Do you have any advice for just like a hypothetical adult that sometimes feels overwhelmed, and at times doesn't believe in themselves and think they're not good enough.
For decades, the middle class has been hollowed out in more than, and not no one administration, but for a long time. Too many good-paying manufacturing jobs move overseas. Factories closed down. Once thriving cities and towns became shadows of what they used to be. And along the way, something else we lost: pride, our sense of self-worth. I ran for president to fundamentally change things, to make sure our economy works for everyone, so we can all feel that pride in what we do. To build an economy from the bottom up and the middle out, not from the top down.
How much should you pay in
Because
taxes?
when the middle class does well, the poor have a ladder up, and the wealthy still do very well. We all do well.
How much should you pay in taxes? Like what percentage? But what about you personally?
The tax system is not fair.
Why are you complaining?
I know how unfair it feels when a company overcharges you and gets away with it.
Is that the right framing?
Not anymore. We've written a bill to stop it all. It's called the Junk Fee Prevention Act. We're going to ban surprise resort fees that hotels charge on your bill. Those fees can cost you up to $90 a night at hotels that aren't even resorts.
Is that the right framing?
The gap between rich and poor in this country is much too large, that we've destroyed the middle class and that the very wealthy people ought to be paying more in taxes. And corporations. I mean, why is it that Amazon didn't pay $1 in taxes? All right. Everybody should pay their fair share.
Oh, we're giving all that money to the very, very rich because they're job creators, and see, all that money trickles down and lifts all boats. They've been saying that for 40 years. It's not lifting all boats. What it does is to leave millions and millions of people without even a life vest. It has caused a massive transfer of wealth from the middle class and from the lower classes, obviously. I hate that expression. The disadvantaged classes is what we should call them, into the hands of a very few. And this last big theft, I say it as a public theft from the public treasury, was in 2017. So this continues. This is the way our public policy works. Take the money and put it into the hands of a very few, causing all this human suffering.
Wait, are you distraught?
It's emotional and psychological shackling.
How do you process things when you're sad or angry?
We need a massive infusion of economic hope and opportunity into the life of the average American.
How'd you beat the system?
What we're seeing today is what I call turnkey totalitarianism.
Whoa.
They are putting in place all of these technological mechanisms for control we've never seen before. It's been the ambition of every totalitarian state from the beginning of mankind to control every aspect of behavior, of conduct, of thought, and to obliterate dissent.
Right.
None of them have been able to do it. They didn't have the technological capacity. Even in Hitler's Germany, you could cross the Alps into Switzerland. You can hide in an attic like Anne Frank did. I visited in 1962 East Germany with my father and met people who had climbed the wall and escaped. So it was possible. Many died doing it, but it was possible.
Are there things adults tell you that you're like, no way, I don't believe that?
No. We are saving people's lives and we're saving democracy because children should not be getting this vaccine.
It sounds like, you are understanding that the world is a complicated, great place.
We know, if you've ever compared an unvaccinated kid to a vaccinated kid, you see the bright eyes and the engagement and the social interactions and the curiosity and the affection and you compare them. A child even had 1 or 2 vaccines and they're completely different. And those injuries don't get measured. They're just a blight on this, and they poisoned an entire generation of American children.
People aren't going to want to hear that. What does toxic mean?
I've thought a lot about how it is that so many of us became chronically disengaged from the issues of politics. And part of it is not just that it's so toxic, but also that our politics seems so far removed from our human realities.
But I've never been more optimistic about our future, about the future of America. We just have to remember who we are. We're the United States of America.
Let's remember, in our Declaration of Independence, which is the mission statement for all Americans, it says not only that we're equal, not only that God gave us inalienable rights of life, of liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, but that governments are instituted to secure those rights, and that if government is not doing that, not performing that function, that it is the right of the people to alter it or to abolish it. Now, let's connect economics to the right to pursue happiness. In the richest country in the world, there's no reason for you to have 40% of our citizens unable to cover an unexpected $1,000 expenditure. That means something's wrong. That means something's very, very wrong. And given the fact that we're the richest country in the world, that means government's not doing its job because those people are not free to pursue happiness.
We're not powerless before the forces that confront us. It's within our power of we, the people. We're facing the test of our time. We have to be the nation we've always been at our best. Optimistic, hopeful, forward-looking. A nation that embraces light over dark, hope over fear, unity over division, stability over chaos.
You want to be an active participant and a good participant in a society?
I think people have kind of woken up to the idea that it is not woo-woo, kooky, crazy to recognize that the problems of our time will not be solved with thinking that is based on bad ideas left over from the end of the 20th century. Einstein said the problems of the world will not be solved on the same level of thinking we were at when we created them. This is a new century. I see it. Young people get it. It's like, it's a whole systems breakdown. We need a whole person response.
Tell me how you do that. I understand it. I mean, it's clear in its face. You're accurate. But how, in making the case of the freedom men have, what do you do to, other than to sort of embarrass men into getting into the argument?
What are you most scared of?
Less than 1% of you. Less than 1% of you.
Facebook, all of the big tech is censoring any information.
Are we on social media? TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter?
Yes.
Yeah.
People should hear what Bobby has to say. They should hear what I have to say. They should hear what the president has to say. That's democracy. They should hear what Cornell has to say.
I will say, I am very entertained.
This is why it's so important that the Democratic Party allow debate so that voters in the Democratic primary can recognize there are 3 candidates so far, and the American people should have as wide an array of options before them as possible.